Cameron making progress? What's your take so far?
Look, it's a tough situation, but I back the guy. We are in a strong position. We are a member of the EU. It has been brilliant for the UK economy. It's been brilliant for UK society. Of course, there are some things that can be done to improve the way that the EU works, but fundamentally, we should and we must stay in. It would be a crazy, illogical, and economically disastrous step to come out of the EU.
Why, Richard? Because of tariffs? I mean, as a businessman, an entrepreneur, and, you know, people say, well, look, the Credit Suisses, all these big banks are going to leave London, the people will pull out, why would you invest in this country? But actually, fundamentally, we haven't really seen that many real figures in saying how much this economy would lose.
Well, actually, every single independent economic analysis of what would happen if we come out of the EU says the same thing. GDP would go down. Now,
Initially.
Right. And then what? I mean, because if you actually ask people to articulate the reason for coming out, there isn't any economic rationale to it. Because what people say is, well, then we could be independent, but we're still going to have trading relationships with the EU. So rather than the thing we've already got, they're saying, well, if we come out, then we can spend years sort of trying to negotiate back to the thing that we already have, but being disadvantaged for not being one of the main guys round the table. I think whether you look at the economics, the politics, society, even the spiritual benefit of being part of EU, it makes absolute sense. Now, I have a huge personal experience of the benefits of it. 17 years ago, myself and two friends, we set up a business selling smoothies from a market stall. 17 years later, it's a billion-dollar brand. It's because we had the ability to trade unhindered with the rest of Europe. And actually, amazing for our business, thank you very much, but also amazing for the UK economy. 50% of the smoothies that we sell to Europe, but 80% of the people that we employ as a business is here in the UK. So we're selling smoothies over there and creating jobs over here.
So try and translate for me this argument. Business is levelled with regulation, it's laboured with lots of costs from Europe. You're a businessman, you've been in business for 17 years.
Yeah.
What's the truth? Are you burdened? Are you frustrated? Are you held back?
Well, I think the trouble with regulation is everyone hates it unless they love it, right? So every bit of regulation is going to affect something and someone. Fundamentally, you have to remember the regulation isn't brought in just to sort of for amusement purposes. It is always brought in at least with the aim of making society better. So yes, there was EU legislation that came and affected our business. Every single piece of it, I looked at it, I read it and went, huh. OK, that's a little bit annoying for us as a business in the short term, but by golly, it's good for society in the longer term, and actually, of course, that fundamentally is going to be good for business. There was things about legislation on labelling, that you couldn't make claims that you can't actually substantiate. As a human being, that's a good idea. As a business, it was a little bit annoying. We had to change a couple of the claims we made on packaging, but it was good in the long-term interests of everyone.
But Richard, what about renegotiating? Because actually what David Cameron is saying is that, you know, he's for staying within the EU, but fundamentally we have to cut the red tape, we have to cut some of the things that actually affect this country, which doesn't make sense, because not all regulation makes sense. Sometimes it is dreamt up after it feels like, you know, a long night out. How would you renegotiate? Is it actually against this idea that the European Union is going to come ever closer? Or is it just on the kind of, you know, red tape? So too many people in Brussels that are paid too much to do too little.
Well, look, I'm an entrepreneur, so I always think about, let's go for the upside first, right? What is the EU? It's many things, but firstly, it's about economic sort of harmonisation. Let's get the EU, let's renegotiate, get more of the good stuff already. There is the free trade agreements that can be extended to every single industry, and then let's get them extended to every single country, because that, again, is a long-term best interest. And I think that is absolutely #1 on our message as Business for New Europe to David Cameron. Please, and I know he's exactly what he wants to do, is extend all the free trade agreements. I have a personal bugbear, is that I also see the EU as a great opportunity to stop multinational businesses essentially gaming the legalities of where they pay tax, or normally whether you don't pay tax. We should be united. We're 500 million consumers. We should unite and say, we're going to stand for that no longer. Where you make revenues and where you make profits, pay your fair share. So there's all these, again, these opportunities, the ability to tackle climate change, ability to tackle serious crime.
Then you see the images that we saw from Uber overnight, which is in the heart of Paris, protesting against change, against improving things for the consumer. And that's the imagery that we're dealing with here in the United Kingdom, isn't it? It's that anti-desire to change.
Well, the truth is, change is pain, and pain is growth, and it's all mixed together. You can't... There is always going to be, like all growing pains, there is going to be some change, there's going to be some winners and some losers. So you have to fundamentally work on what's the best for the most people, what serves the public good. And what the interesting thing is about, and I think it was great what Branson was saying there, is we talk principally about the economics of Europe, but that's incontestable. It is good for business overall, for us to be in Europe, it's good for the economy. But there is just a myriad of other social benefits in terms of the integration, the ability, I love what he said, to be able to marry who you like, live where you like. I mean, again, as a business in the UK and with offices in every European country, anyone can go and work anywhere. So I've got British people going and working in France and French people coming and working in Britain. We don't have to ask anyone's permission, don't have to get any, you know, but that was not always the way.
No, it wasn't.
Most countries would kill for that ability of freedom of movement. Another anecdote, because I know people say we could come out and be like Switzerland. OK, so do we want to be like Switzerland? I've got a good friend who's a Swiss entrepreneur who's literally just moved from Switzerland to London to set up her business so she can trade with the EU, because it's just simpler for her to do that. So she's leaving as an entrepreneur that country that's come here. It's a country that if you put your money in your bank, if you're a hard-working person, at the end of the year you'll have less money in your bank because of negative interest rates. So I don't hold that out. I mean, I love Switzerland, it's a lovely country, but I don't hold that as the
negative interest rate. I mean, it's not their
model.
fault. It's because they're so popular that, of course, they can't pay interest rates. Like, you know,
it's because the rest of the world's so frightened of what's happening in Europe.
Richard, give us a sense of how you see the productivity puzzle in the UK and what you would want from Chancellor Osborne in the budget report.
The budget report, new topic. Look, as an entrepreneur, what do you really want? You want, essentially, what I believe the previous coalition government and this government is delivering is a stable macroeconomic environment. You know, I think to a certain extent, politicians sometimes get a bit too much blame and sometimes they get a bit too much credit, where all the product are sort of the wider economic context. But yes, you essentially want the ability just to get on with things. That's what I ask of any chancellor. I think the guys do a good job. It's the same with the EU. It's the ability, it takes sand out of the machine. As an entrepreneur, you just want to be able to get on with it, looking after your consumers, making products, getting them to market. Anything that gets in the way of that, not helpful. A level playing field where we can go where the consumers are and give them what they want, good for business.
All right. Richard, thank you so much. Richard Reid there, Innocent Drinks co-founder. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you.